You see the message, you care about the person who sent it, and you know replying would probably take less than a minute. Yet you still close the notification and tell yourself you will answer when you have more energy. A few hours become a few days, more messages begin piling up, and eventually even a simple question like, "How have you been?" feels as though it requires an explanation you are not ready to give. You're not necessarily angry with anyone, and you may not have stopped caring about the people in your life. You simply do not want to explain yourself, carry another conversation, or become the version of you that knows how to appear interested, cheerful, and available. In this video, we are going to look at why talking to people can suddenly feel exhausting, how withdrawal becomes a form of protection, and why the silence that brings relief at first can eventually make connection even harder. Perhaps you have not lost interest in people at all, but have become exhausted by how you feel you should act around them. Withdrawing usually begins in harmless ways. You ignore one call after a tiring day, cancel a plan because you need time alone, or postpone a reply because you do not know what to say. The problem begins when almost every interaction starts feeling like another responsibility. Messages become tasks. Phone calls feel like interruptions, and plans create pressure long before they happen because you are already calculating how much energy they will require. Instead of wondering whether you will enjoy seeing someone, you think about the questions you will have to answer and how long you must remain engaged before you can leave. The people around you may not have changed, but your experience of connection has, turning something that once felt natural into emotional labor. Conversation becomes exhausting when you are not only talking, but also monitoring yourself throughout it. You wonder whether you are speaking too much, whether your expression looks interested enough, or whether your answer sounds strange. You soften opinions that might create tension and say you are fine because telling the truth would require more energy than you have. Over time, you may learn that certain versions of you are easier for others to accept. The cheerful version receives fewer questions. The agreeable version avoids conflict, and the independent version never asks for too much. Being alone then feels relieving because it is the only place where you no longer have to manage how you're perceived. Texting should feel easier because it gives you time to think, yet that freedom can create a different kind of pressure. You begin constructing the perfect response, trying to sound warm without inviting a long conversation, honest without becoming emotionally heavy, and interested without pretending to have energy you do not possess. So you decide to answer later, but as time passes, guilt is added to the original pressure. Now you feel as though you need an apology for disappearing, and avoiding the conversation feels easier than returning to it. This is how people can slowly disappear from relationships they genuinely value, not because they no longer care, but because the pressure to respond correctly becomes stronger than the desire to respond at all. For some people, the reluctance to talk comes from exhaustion, while for others, it develops after repeatedly feeling dismissed, misunderstood, judged, or emotionally drained. When opening up leads to advice you never requested, vulnerability is used against you, or your needs are treated like an inconvenience. Your mind begins associating closeness with risk. You stop sharing important things because explaining them rarely produces the understanding you hoped for, and you stop asking for support because disappointment feels worse than carrying the problem alone. Distance then feels protective because nobody can reject what you need if you never ask for it, and nobody can misunderstand the parts of you that remain hidden. The difficulty is that protection and isolation can feel almost identical. Both reduce the immediate chance of being hurt, but only one leaves space for connection to return. Avoiding an interaction creates immediate relief because the phone stops ringing, the plan is cancelled, and the pressure disappears. Your mind begins learning that withdrawal works since each avoided conversation makes you feel calmer and makes avoidance easier to repeat. However, relief does not always mean that something is healthy. Sometimes it simply means you have removed the situation making you anxious. The more often you withdraw, the less familiar connection feels. Ordinary pauses become uncomfortable. Small disagreements seem more intense, and replying after a long absence feels almost impossible. You may interpret that discomfort as proof that staying away was right, creating a cycle in which avoidance brings relief, but makes the next interaction even harder. Eventually, you are no longer only protecting your energy, but also losing confidence in your ability to connect. The answer is not to force yourself into crowded rooms or become constantly available, because sometimes you do not need more interaction. you need interaction that requires less performance. You may need someone who allows silence without rushing to fill it. A person you can speak to without turning every emotion into a perfectly organized explanation, or a friendship where delayed replies are not treated as rejection. Reconnection can begin with something small, such as answering one message honestly, choosing a short walk instead of a large social event, or admitting that you have been distant because you feel overwhelmed. Healthy connection does not require constant access to you. The important question is whether solitude is helping you recover enough to return to your life, or becoming a place where you slowly disappear from it. Maybe you do not want to talk to anyone because you are exhausted, disappointed, or afraid that another interaction will demand more than you can currently give. There's nothing wrong with needing space, but when silence stops feeling peaceful and begins feeling like the only place where you're safe, it may be worth asking what you are protecting yourself from. You may not dislike people as much as you dislike feeling watched, misunderstood, responsible for everyone's comfort, or pressured to become easier to accept. The part of you that keeps withdrawing may not be asking to be left alone forever. It may be asking for a form of connection in which you no longer have to perform in order to belong. If this made you think, subscribe to keep discovering your inner self.